my name is Shane, and as you can tell from my accent, I am not from New Zealand. I'm part of our Nashville office in the United States. Mobile Mentor is a mobile technology company that's headquartered here in Auckland, New Zealand. We've been in business for 15 years, and we focus on app security and support for the mobile workforce. Today, I'd like to talk to you a bit about unlocking Microsoft 365. So Microsoft 365 is comprised of three main components. That's Office, which you're probably familiar with, Enterprise Mobility and Security, or EMS for short, and Windows 10. And I'm going to go through each of those a little bit in detail today. So the first piece is Office 365, and I've got some good news. I'm not here to talk to you about Excel or Word. What I am here to talk to you about is the Microsoft Power Platform, which some of you may be aware of, but I would bet most of you are not. That consists of Microsoft Power Apps, Microsoft Flow, and Microsoft Power BI. The most familiar of which for most people is going to be Power BI. So that's a data visualization software. It's just for charting and graphing data from various systems. The two that you may not have heard of before is Microsoft Flow and Microsoft Power Apps. So Flow is an automation tool, and what it allows you to do is you can automate business processes without the need for extensive coding knowledge. So it's connected to the entire Office 365 ecosystem, and in addition to quite a few other third-party applications and platforms. So in fact, there's over 200 different connections, and Flow allows you in a web browser to automate business flows either based on an event or some triggered action, like a file being created, something like that. And then a workflow can be built. And so for examples of that, we use a couple of those right now internally in Mobile Mentor. One is we have a database of certificates that we manage for our clients, and we built an automated flow that just checks the database, and every time one of those certs is within 30 days of expiring, it actually kicks a flow off into our Microsoft Teams channel and informs our security engineers that, hey, a cert's coming up for expiration. One of them can assign that to themselves, and then the manager can check for approval on that same flow whenever they've completed the renewal of the cert. Microsoft Power Apps I'll go into just a little bit more, because I think that one's actually the more exciting of the three. So this is an example of a Power App that we've created in the US. We use Microsoft Power Apps a lot for rapid prototyping in our app development, because it allows us to create interactive demonstrations that you can't really get with a wireframe. So we made this one for a chief nursing officer at a US hospital system, and it took us about a week to put it together. Low-code development is something that's kind of starting to gain traction a lot in the IT industry. And what we found in some IDC research this year is that low-code developers in the United States represent 11.3% of developers, whereas in the APJ region it's only 4.7%. To back that up, another vendor that's outside, I think right over there, they've got a booth, is OutSystems. Now, they make a competing low-code platform to Power Apps, but they're showing that companies who have adopted low-code are able to show a 12% improvement on their backlog, so they're clearing their backlog better than companies that are not using low-code. They're able to get web apps done in less than 4 months at an 11% advantage, and they're actually able to get mobile apps done in less than 4 months at a 15% advantage. So the advantage to Microsoft Power Apps is that it's connected to the entire Microsoft ecosystem, and if you have Office 365, or in this case Microsoft 365, you're already paying for it. It greatly lowers the bar needed to develop mobile applications, so you can free this up for your business units and allow them to experiment and to trial and fuel innovation within your companies. And then with a bit of governance, you can actually set up the ability for them to promote these type of solutions up. And you'll probably want to be careful with that, because you don't want a total Wild West scenario, because people that haven't coded before don't always architect the best solutions. But as long as you keep an eye on that, then you should be able to promote some really good ideas from your business units without the need for formal IT to be involved every step of the way. So that's the first piece. The next thing I want to talk to you about is EMS, right? So that's Enterprise Mobility and Security. And from left to right, that effectively is identity, endpoints, data, and cloud. And the two at the bottom, ATA and ATP, those are advanced threat analytics and protection. So ATA is machine learning and AI for your traditional domain joined LAN network, and then ATP is for cloud infrastructure. So what that does, in the last 20 years, when computers, really get popular, say in the 80s and 90s, you had a traditional workstation, right? A person comes into your building and it's a trusted user, and they're on a trusted computer, and they're in a trusted domain, right? And that paradigm isn't really true anymore, right? All of you are probably checking emails on your phone. I mean, I've got email on my watch. I'm presenting at a conference in Auckland, New Zealand, and my office is in, Nashville, Tennessee. So the world has drifted away from the concept of, a controlled domain paradigm. And so EMS is layer security for the cloud-first, mobile-first world. And the way that it works is it secures your identity, then it secures your endpoints and your data, and even allows for conditional access. So Active Directory was traditionally something that would be behind a firewall, right? You would have to VPN in and then you authorize. That's no longer the case, and EMS will allow you to do cloud-based authentication, cloud-based enrollment, so that your workers can work from wherever they want on the planet without the need to VPN and work through that. And that's EMS. The third piece, which I want to spend most of my time on because I think it's the most significant part of the Microsoft 365 suite, is Windows 10. So Windows 10 licenses come along for the ride with your 365, Microsoft 365 license. You'll notice we have a tagline that says manage like a smartphone. So let me take you on a trip through history, and let's talk about the bleeding edge of technology in 1995, which was the Motorola StarTAC. Around the same time that this phone came out, Microsoft came up with the predecessor to SCCM, right? So that's System Center Configuration Manager. And that was the concept of you can make an image for your workstation, and then once you got that image set, you just replicate it, and you can hand it out, and then everybody's working on the same system, the same versioning, the same group policy, and everything's on there. And in 1995, that was pretty revolutionary. So here we are, 25 years later. There's been some improvements to this, right? There's PXE, so you can boot over the network. And then there's the Microsoft deployment system and the Microsoft deployment toolkit. And so there have been some improvements. But effectively, for 25 years, we've been working under the same system. And what we've gone to is this to this, right? So that's, we've added some pretty shininess to it, but it's still the same thing. Meanwhile, in the mobile world, there's been a complete paradigm shift. It was pioneered by BlackBerry and later mastered by Android and Apple. And what they've done is they've set up a system where your devices are enrolled from the vendor and they're shipped directly to the user. When the user gets this device, they then log into it as they turn it on, right? And then all the protection, all the apps, all the security, everything for that device comes down through the air. And this is a complete drift away from the standard domain join, VPN, LAN, lockdown, traditional Windows network. And so that's traditional management, and we are getting away from that. And what we're going to do with Windows 10 is we're going to go from this to this. What that means is that with modern management and Windows 365, you can manage your Windows 10 like a smartphone. So I'm going to go through that a bit more in detail. But just a quick couple of things on that. We believe, and there's some data to back this up that I'll get into in a minute, that this is going to drastically lower the cost of Windows endpoint management. And we believe that it's going to free your IT up and hopefully get you guys out of keeping the lights on mode and get you into innovation and helping your company do fun things. So let's go through modern management a little bit in detail. Modern management is four things. It's deployment and provisioning, it's identity and authentication, it's configuration, and it's updating and servicing. The first piece, deployment and provisioning. This is the old school way, right? Which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, right? You're either going to order the computer from your vendor or otherwise take it out of stock. Then you're going to join it to the domain. You're going to, image it, join it to the domain, add all the group policy, all the app packages, everything to it. And then and only then do you hand it to your employee. And they're going to log in, and based on their Active Directory groups and other things, they're going to get some additional group policy, and then finally they're able to use it. Right? So this is the way that we've been doing things for a long time. As the speaker announced before me, I used to work at AIG, and they're kind of a big company, and we did this. Right? I went through a couple of different laptops versions with them. Now, to be fair, I was a developer, so my build was a little more complex. But every time it was like a week-long event. Right? We
They would image this thing and then they'd hand it to me, and inevitably it wouldn't be right, and I'd have to call this poor help desk guy, and he would get harassed by me. And eventually, after a week or so, we'd get a laptop that I could use again. And that's how it's been for years. Show of hands, how many of you guys use this method and are able to get a new computer out to somebody in less than a day? Anybody? So, there you go. All right, so the new way. This is what's going to be possible with Autopilot. So that's Microsoft's new program under modern management. And it's a total break from the traditional method. So what this is going to do is it's going to make Windows management the same way that you're used to with your mobile devices. And that means your vendor will be able to register a device when you purchase it into your tenant, and then you'll be able to ship that device straight from the vendor to the user. When that user gets it, they open it out of the box, sign in with their Azure Active Directory account, and then it's going to begin downloading all of the policies, all the apps, all the security that you're used to right through the air. And if that sounds familiar to like iOS, that's because it is. It's the new way that things are going to work, right? While all of that's downloading, they'll be able to use the computer. So all this happens in the background. Now there is a limitation, obviously. If you need to download an application, you can't use it until it gets to the machine, right? But I recently did this with our Microsoft Surface Pro. We use modern management at Mobile Mentor. So in the Nashville office, we manage everything from Auckland, New Zealand. I got it out of the box, signed into it, it downloaded everything, and I had it up and running in an hour. So that's the difference. That's the point in provision. The next piece is identity and authentication. So identity and authentication with modern management happens through Azure Active Directory. If you don't yet use Azure Active Directory, you should understand that that is a critical requirement for this. And if you haven't started that journey yet, it may be time to consider doing so. All of your identity and authentication is going to come through the cloud. That means Microsoft is actually the person handling your authorization. It also means multi-factor is innate and part of the experience, right? The first time I log into a device, I also two-factor along with it. Afterwards, I can use Windows Hello on many new machines. And that means that I'm using biometrics. That's very similar to Face ID and Touch ID. You all have experience with Apple, I'm sure. What may not be readily apparent from this slide is that because all of the authentication comes through Microsoft, they handle hundreds of millions of authentication attempts a day. And that's quickly scaling towards 1 billion. So they work at a scale that no individual organization can work at. Attackers, generally speaking, don't attack just one network. When they, when they do attacks, they tend to attack for weak points across many different tenants and organizations. The advantage of the scale of Azure Active Directory is that Microsoft can detect these malicious actors and oftentimes shut them down before they even make it to the tenant. So that's identity and authentication. The next piece is configuration. Configuration with modern management means that for the first time, you will be able to manage your entire fleet of end-user devices from one unified dashboard, right? So because you can manage your Windows endpoints through the cloud the same way that you have with your mobile devices for about a decade, that means you can do it all from one spot. Now that doesn't have to be Microsoft technology, right? There are some competitors to Microsoft that have put together some pretty good stuff. And if you like the competitor stuff, use it, right? That's okay. But the point being that from a consolidated dashboard, I can now check my entire device inventory for mobile, for my endpoints for Windows. I can check device health. All of that can be done from one spot. And because of that, all of my protection for my Windows endpoints is now cloud-based, right? I can enroll a device directly from the vendor, and then I can set up all the policies, protections, app updates, and all this through the cloud. And it doesn't require you to send it to the IT dungeon first. You don't have to main join it. You don't have to deal with any of that. That's configured. The final piece in modern management is updating and servicing. So how many of you guys know what WSS means? Probably, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So with modern management, you will no longer have to be the gatekeeper of Windows updates. What you do is instead you can set up Windows Update rings. And that means based on your organizational risk tolerance, you can choose at what point you want your endpoint devices to do Windows updates. Right? You can also stage them, so you don't have to set up the entire fleet to go in one ring. You can obviously do bits and pieces of them along there. And again, that's based on the risk tolerance. And that's Windows updates. Application updates are going to be handled through your enterprise app store. So you simply set the applications up, and then the users can self-service and download the applications for you. All right, so that effectively is modern management, right? It's taking a Windows machine and getting away from a 25-year-old management paradigm and moving it over to a mobile paradigm, right? Windows 10 under the hood is much closer to iOS than it is to Windows 7, at least in regards of management. Okay. All right, so cost savings. So let's talk about the so what, right? So, okay, that's great. It's a new technology. What do I care? All right, so Microsoft has done some research on their own. And what they've shown is that they believe there will be a 20% reduction in help desk calls once you transition to modern management. 45% reduction in application testing and provisioning, and a 70% reduction in application testing. Mobile Iron, who's a partner of ours that we've worked with for many years, they also have a modern management solution. And they believe, that's maybe a bit rosy, but they believe that estimated savings can be as high as 80% if you exclude the cost of a telco line with a cell phone. Again, I don't know that we're actually going to see 80%, but we'll see. Internally, we've been doing modern management in the U.S. Office of Mobile Mentor since it opened, so that's almost 2 years now. And I will tell you, in fair things, we have a small sample size, but what we've seen is that on average, about 12% of our staff are submitting 1 or more tickets per month on our Windows endpoints, and that's very close to what we see for our clients who we manage their mobile fleet. So we're actually seeing that internally, at least for us, our Windows management is trending much more towards the way we've seen mobile for the past 6-7 years. There's also some licensing benefits that you'll get out of this. So I don't know if any of you have the headache of like 100,000 IT vendors to manage your Windows fleet, but we believe that there will be some significant house cleaning that can go along with that, right? VPN. Once you get over to modern management, you can just drop that entirely. There will be some limitations for large organizations, obviously, but that's a big deal. Sandboxing, the OS itself is already sandboxed, so that's kind of a new feature of Windows 10. And then the patching and the backup and all of that headache you can get rid of it, which is good. I don't know. Maybe you guys are excited about maintaining your Windows. I'm not. So that's the reason to take it. Finally, let's talk about release cycles. So, for those of you in the audience that have a fading hairline like me or otherwise some gray hair, you will have been around for a little while. And you'll know that over the past 30 years, there's been about 7, I think, Windows operating system upgrades. And probably most of you skipped Windows Vista, would be my guess. So we probably haven't even dealt with all of them internal to our organization. And we worked under a paradigm of what we would call change control, right? So we only do updates every so many years, and when we do, it's this huge multi-year initiative, and we got to have a CIO level initiative and a bunch of people scurrying around and doing all this organizational stuff. That's going to change with Windows 10. Windows 10 is a mobile operating system, and that means it acts like a mobile operating system. iOS has averaged an OS upgrade every year. Android is averaging one about every 10 months. Windows 10 is averaging one major update every 6 months. In fact, it's such a frequent update that since I started this slide deck, we've had another one, right? It's not, they just released the May this week or last week. So gone are the days when an update was done every 4 or 5 years and it's completely locked down within your network. People are going to be bringing their own devices. They're going to be doing their updates on their own. You can delay these updates, but you can't totally eliminate them. We are moving from a world of controlled change to, managed change, which means that the change comes and it's just your job to manage it. If you continue to use traditional management techniques, you are going to be in a world of hurt. That's where we go. So today we've gone over Microsoft 365. We talked about the Power Platform and how it will accelerate innovation for you through low code, through automated flows, and through Power BI. We talked about EMS and how it allows you to secure devices in a new cloud-first, mobile-first world that's not locked down behind the domain. And we talked about Windows 10 and the drastic changes coming to managing end user devices through that. And so that leaves you with a choice. You can keep kicking the can down the road and doing your Windows 10 management the way that it's been done for the past 30 years. Or you can leave the imaging and the WSUS and all that headache behind, and you can move into a true cloud-first world. We have a booth. It's located over by the main room. We've got Simon and Amanda there who'd be willing to talk to you if you have any questions. I'll also be here for the next couple of hours.